We have a problem here. I have this problem, and I bet you face the same problem. I buy tons and tons and tons of books on Amazon. I probably spend close to $1,000 a year on books. But what's been happening lately is because my life is so busy, as I'm sure yours is, I have stacks of books on my bedside table, under my dining table, under my work desk. I have run out of bookshelves, and even my iPad has something like 490 books. Now the problem is, only 10% of these have actually been read. So we have a habit of buying books because books do so much for us. They help us grow, they help us learn, they arouse our curiosity about the world. But we all face limited time, and we never get to go through as many books as we want to. And so I decided that I really wanted to learn speed reading. But as soon as I started looking into speed reading, I withdrew. I couldn't find a speed reading course that really helped me. I tried to read books on speed reading but couldn't come up with the time to actually go through these books. And I started to worry that if I could speed read, I would lose comprehension. In other words, I might be able to get through a book faster, but is that information going to stick in my head? And that's when I met Jim Quick. 3 years ago, Jim entered my life. His first program didn't cover speed reading, but it covered the idea of developing a super brain, how to improve memory, how to improve learning. That program went on to become the #1 best-selling program in the history of Mindvalley. But while Superbrain is wonderful, it doesn't completely solve the problem at hand, which is the stack of books that we dream of getting through, which is why we decided to go back to Jim and give Jim an assignment. Could we, Mindvalley and Jim Quick, develop the world's #1 speed reading program so that you, so that me, could basically get through these stacks of books and retain the information in our head? If you look at all the data out there, the smartest people in the world are readers. Bill Gates said if he could have one superpower, it would be speed reading. And today, we're going to give you that superpower, and in fact show you, not just through this masterclass, but at the end of this masterclass, how to go deeper and master speed reading in 21 days with our man, Jim Quick. There are thousands of online programs out there. We know your time is valuable, so our job is to create the best technology, the best learning design, and primarily bring you the best teacher in the world. We've been searching and working and looking at top speed reading teachers since August 2016, and it took us all that time to identify the man whom we believe is the #1 teacher in the world today. That's Jim Quick. And when you see him educate you on speed reading today, you'll understand why. Jim is the brain coach for Hollywood superstars. See this picture? He was brought in to train the entire cast of the X-Men. And not just the X-Men, but check these images out. These are A-listers in Hollywood who learn from Jim to not just go through their scripts faster, but to retain the information. He has been brought in by Elon Musk to speak and train at SpaceX. In that SpaceX audience was Musk and his 5 sons. He's spoken at Google, Virgin, Nike, Zappos, NYU, GE, Fox Studios, Caltech, Harvard, Singularity University, and 20th Century Fox. Why Jim is so in demand is because the smartest, most talented people in the world know that their superpower is their rate of consumption of knowledge. And nobody teaches that better than Jim. And I want you to pay attention to this nuance. The reason I never took up speed reading before is because I was afraid that I would forget the information, that I couldn't read fast but also comprehend. We are going to shatter this myth in this masterclass. Not only are you going to be able to read faster, but you're going to be able to retain and apply that information better. Imagine your life if you could read a book a week, 52 books a year. Think about what that would do to the way you show up in the world, to how you perform at your job, to how you educate your children, how you do your mission in the world. It magnifies everything. This is why speed reading, I'm sure you agree, is one of the greatest skills you could develop. Now keep in mind that in this masterclass, you're going to increase your reading speed significantly. It's going to make a phenomenal difference. So make sure you block out this time and you have a pencil and a book handy, because we're going to take you through some important exercises. Also, there's a workbook right below this video. Download the workbook. This will also give you some pre-written notes so you don't have to worry about writing everything down. We want to make this a powerful learning experience for you. But also know that this masterclass is part of Mindvalley's speed reading program with Jim Kwik, which is a 21-day program. And while this masterclass is going to increase your reading speed, for those of you who want to really master speed reading and completely change the way you show up in the world, be able to read a book a week in just hours, and then remember, retain, apply that information, I encourage you to go through the 21-day program. But more on that later at the end of this class. Before I call on Jim, I have to share these stories with you. This is what some of the world's greatest minds have said about Jim Kwik. Brendan Burchard said, "I read faster because of Jim. I have a better memory because of him. Love his stuff." The legendary Brian Tracy said, "He is one of the foremost authorities in the world on this subject." Dr. Daniel Amen said, "Jim Kwik is just amazing." In my new book, Use Your Brain to Change Your Age, I wrote a whole chapter about him because one of the strategies to reverse brain aging and to prevent Alzheimer's disease is to work on your brain. Peter Diamandis, one of the men truly changing the landscape of the world today, said, "Real thanks to Jim Kwik and the whole team for the minds that they are creating, how they are empowering people to change the world and commit to making this a better planet." Forbes said, "Jim's superpower is learning. It enables all success in a fast-paced, fast-changing world." Right now, I want you to get ready with a big round of applause as we welcome Jim Kwik. Welcome, Jim. It's so good to have you here.
It's great to be here, Vishen. I'm so excited about this conversation, and thank you everybody who's watching this.
And I also want to congratulate you because just a few months ago, you received 2 awards here on Mindvalley. And these awards were given to you based on audience votes. So Jim won an award for the best mentoring episode on Mindvalley, which was, incidentally, on speed reading. Secondly, Jim also won the award for being the most popular teacher on Mindvalley.
Wow.
And that is because Superbrain, in English and in Spanish, is a singular best-selling program in the company history.
It's a complete honor. Thank you everybody for making that happen.
So Jim, you've got a story that is so moving. I love listening to it. And I'd love for you to share this story with people here who might be new to your work.
Sure. So when people see me on the Mindvalley stage and they see me on the Mindvalley YouTube, all these videos, sometimes they'll see me do these demonstrations where I'll have a number of people stand up, maybe 50 or 100 people, and I'll remember all their names, or the audience will give me 100 numbers or 100 random words, and I recite them and recall them forwards and then also backwards. I always tell people I don't do this to impress you. I do this to really express to you what's possible. Because the truth is, every single person listening and watching this right now could do that and a whole lot more. We just were not taught. If anything, we were taught a lie that somehow our memory, our intelligence, our reading ability, our potential is somehow fixed, like our shoe size. But we've discovered more about the human brain, more in the past 10 years than the previous 1,000 years combined. And what we found is we're grossly underestimating our own capabilities. So if you're struggling in this area, I know how you feel, because I felt the same exact way. I grew up with learning difficulties that stem from a brain injury that I had when I was a child. I was 5 years old in school. I took a very bad fall and I was rushed to the hospital, and my parents said I was never the same after that. And I couldn't learn as everybody else did. I had very poor focus. I had a very bad memory. I didn't understand things.
And this was when you were as young as 5 and 6.
As 5 and 6, and the teachers would repeat themselves 3 or 4 or 5 times, and then eventually I would pretend to understand, but I didn't really understand. And my worst area of learning in school was actually reading. How ironic, right?
Wow.
It's one of those things where I could not read. It took me an extra 3.5 years to learn how to read. And it was very frightening. Do you remember back in school, I think a lot of people could relate to this. Do you remember when they would pass around that book? You would get in circles and you would have to pass around the book, and you'd have to, when you got it, read to the rest of the class.
I remember that.
And I think every single time that book got closer and closer and closer to me, my heart would just beat faster and faster and faster. And when the book came to me, I would just look at the pages and the words didn't have any meaning to me, and I would just pass the book on to the next person. And
Wow.
that's how I felt. I learned actually how to read by reading comic books late at night when my parents thought I was sleeping. And so if people, we talk about superheroes and superpowers and super brains, it can stem from the hero's journey. There's illustrations that one person can make a difference, that good versus evil, that together everyone could achieve more. Those are big themes in my life. And so I grew up with these learning challenges all through school. And even at the age of 9, I remember a teacher pointing to me in front of the whole entire class and said, "That's the boy with a broken brain."
Wow.
And adults have to be very careful with their external words because they become a child's internal words.
So you grew up with that belief that you were somehow brain-wise broken.
Yeah, and I always tell people, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. So many people come to me and they say, "Jim, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I have a bad memory. I'm a horrible reader." And then you say those things, and if people who are watching this, if you truly understood how powerful your mind is, you wouldn't say or think something you didn't want to be true. Because your brain is like a supercomputer, and your self-talk is the program it will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at reading, you will not remember the things that you read because you program your supercomputer not to. So be very conscious of that inner voice.
I love your story, Jim, because you grew up with the belief that you had a broken brain.
Yeah.
And you did. You had that accident as a 5-year-old. Your parents were immigrants, and they came here with really nothing.
Yeah.
And if you can do this, anyone can do this. So I want you all to think about that for a moment. Look at where Jim came from and the disadvantages that Jim had in childhood. Yet today, he's the #1 brain coach in the world. But at one point, Jim literally had a brain injury. He was failing at school, but he made a decision. Now ask yourself, are you going to make that decision? It's all in here. Ask yourself, if you could get that passcode to unlock that supercomputer in your head, would you do it? And how would your life change? So Jim, you came from severe disadvantages. What was that spark that got you into speed reading?
I remember when I was 18 years old, I was lucky to get into a state school, and I wanted to make my family proud. I was like, this is a fresh start for me. And I actually did worse because the course load was way more, and I was ready to quit because I didn't have the money to be there. And a friend said, "Hey, before you quit, get some perspective." And I go visit his family for that weekend, and the father takes me around his property and asks me a very simple question. Asks me this question, says, "How's school?" And this is the worst question you could ask me at this time. And I break down, and I'm emotionally reserved, but I just break down in front of some complete stranger, and I said, "I'm not good enough. I have this brain injury." Tell him my whole story. And he's like, "Jim, why are you in school? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have, share with the world?" And I honestly didn't have an answer. And he asked me again, and I go to answer him. He says, "Stop." And he pulls out a journal out of his back pocket, and he tears out a couple of sheets, and he hands them to me and makes me write it down. And that's really a key to success, is writing these things down. And he grabs it right out of my hands, and he starts reading my dreams. And I'm freaking out because I don't expect a stranger to be, to share that with him. And he's like, "Jim," he looks at me, "you are this close to everything on that list." And he spreads his index fingers about 1 foot apart. And I'm thinking, no way, give me 10 years and I'm not gonna crack that dream list. Because I'm sure we all have dreams, that that we haven't achieved yet, right? And he takes his fingers and he puts them to the side of my head, meaning what's in between my brain is the key to unlocking all those dreams. And he takes me into his home, into a room I've never seen before. You'd love it, Vishen. It's wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books, like a library in somebody's house, right? And keep in mind, I hate books. I've never finished a book cover to cover, and it's like being a room full of snakes. But what makes it worse is he starts handing snakes to me. And I start looking at these titles of books, and there are these books of some incredible women and men in history, like the people that changed the world, and some very early personal growth books, right, by all of our mentors through time. And he says, Jim, I want you to read one book a week. And I'm thinking, haven't you heard my story? I have a brain injury. I'm a slow reader. I have all this schoolwork. And he looks right at me when I said schoolwork, and he said, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education. That Mark Twain quote, which I didn't realize this was over 25 years ago. It was Mark Twain. And it's so interesting. He pulls out my bucket list, which he still has, and he starts reading all of my dreams out loud. And with that leverage, because there were so many things I wanted to do for my family on that list, I agreed to read one book a week. So fast forward, now I'm at school, and I have a pile of books I have to read for exams and a pile of books I promised to read. So what do? I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't exercise, I don't spend time with friends, I don't do anything that's nurturing for me, and I just live in the library 24/7.
You're just holed up in your college library.
24/7, and then one night, I just pass out of sheer exhaustion, and I fall down a flight of stairs in the library. I hit my head again.
Again?
And I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. And at this point, I woke up, I'm hooked with all these IVs, I'm malnourished, dehydrated.
What happened? You fell in a coma for 2 days?
Like 2 days, I was just out of sheer exhaustion.
I see.
And I was depleted. I was down to 117 pounds. I mean, I was wasting away. I mean, it was the darkest time in my life. I felt like I was dying or I was dead, and maybe part of me, wished I was, because I was such a, I just was not living up to anything close to what I thought I should be or I wanted to be. And I was working really hard, harder than anyone around me, but I wasn't working smart because nobody taught me how to do that.
And that's the nuance, work smart.
Right, and everyone always talks about working smart, but how do you do it? And really, speed reading is that tool. So what happens is I'm in the hospital bed, and I thought there has to be a better way. I'm gonna give myself one last chance. And when I had that thought, the universe responded in the form of a mug. The nurse came in and gave me some tea. And on this mug was a picture of Albert Einstein, a genius, the opposite of what I thought I was. And he spoke to me in these words. It was a quote on the mug that said, in some iteration, we've all heard this before, the same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem. And it made me ask a new question. And it made me ask, what's my problem? Well, I'm a really slow reader and a very slow learner. And I was thinking, well, how do I think differently about it? Well, maybe I can learn how to read faster. Maybe I can learn how to learn faster.
And what I got out of that is that it doesn't matter the circumstance. Like, you were really, really, really going through some agony. You were in hospital because of this fall, 2 days in a coma. You were trying your best to heed your mentor's advice, schoolwork and reading a book a week.
Right.
But what was different about you is that you decided that you were not going to do it the ordinary way, which is hard work. You were going to look at smart work, and you asked yourself that question sparked by that Einstein mug, right? And that question was, how do you master reading?
Right.
And when you mastered speed reading, that's when everything fell into place.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you graduated college.
Yes.
But it's incredible to think that it started with that mug from Einstein and the idea that speed reading could be that answer that could unlock so many things for you.
And that's really the mission of why we created this quest, is because we want to make this available for everybody, because it's a linchpin. It's in the military, they call it a force multiplier, that the same amount of input could give you multiple rewards.
A force multiplier. Now, for those of you watching right now, I want you to remember this moment, because what you're about to experience is a force multiplier. You're about to learn how to improve your reading speed, and a good chunk of you are also going to be enrolling in Jim's 21-day speed reading program. And you're not just going to increase your reading speed, you're going to increase it so much that you're going to experience a force multiplier in your life. This is going to be your Einstein mug. Jim, let's go back to speed reading. So how we teach in these master classes are, we try to give you new belief systems, because when you upgrade your belief systems, things in life change. Our world is a reflection of our beliefs. So we're going to upgrade your belief systems when it comes to speed reading. But we're also going to teach you a process, a simple system. This is like step one in maybe like a 10 to 15 step approach, right? This is step one, and this simple step will already increase your reading speed. But first, let's talk about the belief system. I think there's a great myth in the world today, and the myth is that speed reading is simply an extra skill. It's a nice to have skill.
Right.
And I know you disagree.
Yeah, in my experience of teaching it at public schools and universities and working with some of the top thought leaders, I see this common thread where people say, oh, it'd be nice to be able to read more, but it's such a necessity right now because the world we live in an age of digital overload. There's too much information, not enough time. So here's the key. All behavior is belief-driven, and there's a certain set of skills that you need to have. They're not a nice-to-have, they are a must-to-have. Recently, I got the honor of speaking at one of your Mindvalley gatherings, and it was shot, we were in a power plant, right?
Right.
And which was incredible. I've never spoken at a power plant before, but I told this story about a power plant that was active, and one day, this busy power plant just goes silent. Every machine just turns off. And the employees are going around, they're freaking out for hours. And finally, the operations manager picks up the phone and doesn't know what to do, picks up the phone and calls the local technician and says, you gotta help us, we're going out of business. This is very dangerous. And she's like, you're lucky, I'm just around the corner, I'm 5 minutes away. He shows up and he walks around the floor, and in the area, there are all these beams, and on these beams, all of them have these electrical boxes. And he goes to one specific beam, and on it, he goes to one specific electrical box. He takes out a magic marker, puts a big X on it, and he opens it up, and inside are all these wires and screws. And he goes to one specific screw, turns it not even halfway, and all of a sudden, bam, the entire power plant lights up. And the operations manager is like, thank you so much, you saved the day, how much do I owe you? And he says, that would be $10,000. And the manager was like, are you kidding me? You were here for 5 minutes. All you did was turn one screw. Give me an itemized bill. And he was like, no problem. Reaches into his pocket, scribbles something on a notebook, tears out the sheet, gives it to him. The manager looks at it and says, I understand. He goes to his desk, takes out his checkbook, writes a check for $10,000, hands it to the technician. You look at the invoice, it says this, turning screw, $1. Knowing what screw to turn, $9,999. And the message to everyone who's watching this and listening to is this. There's two messages, and it's not that you have a screw loose. The message is this. Number one, knowledge is not only power, knowledge is profit. In today's economy, the knowledge economy, you're paid for what's up here. It's no longer your brute strength, it's your brain strength. It's not your muscle power, it's your mind power. Your total value that you have in this economy is your idea to solve problems, to be able to create, to have these new ideas and act on them quickly, but we're not trained on how to do that. But I want you to put a premium on knowledge. It's this divide, it's not just those who have and those who don't have, it's this divide between people who know things and people who do not know things. So that's why speed reading is a must-have skill. But the second lesson to learn from this story about the power plant is not only that knowledge is profit and invest in that because that's the best return you're ever going to get, is also that it was only one or two screws that turn on everything else. And really, I've identified about 21 of these screws that you could turn on that totally transforms your brain and your ability to read and focus and remember things. And I know in this masterclass, we're going to talk about 2 of them. And then we go way deeper in our quest together. But learn what those screws are, because it's kind of like the lead domino, that when you hit that domino, all the other ones get knocked down also. And that's working smart, not hard. Find out what those screws are.
I love that. I love that. So I can't wait to see what's going to happen. So I want you to think about all the things you have to read on a daily basis, right? We kind of underestimate how important reading is to us. If you are the average person today tuning into this masterclass, you probably have a job. And this means that every single day you're reading news, You're reading social media to get caught up with your friends. You are reading reports to stay up to date in your industry. You're reading emails, you're reading Slacks, you're reading WhatsApp messages, you're reading internal company documents and memos, you're reading external white papers. You have to read books to keep your skills constantly growing. So there's so much time we have to spend every single day just on reading. For the average person, this can be anywhere from 1 to 4 hours a day. Now, what if we could take that reading and not only cut the time in half, but increase your comprehension and retention? What would you do with 2 extra hours a day? But not only that, who would you be if you could use these extra hours and your ability to speed read to now also take on a book a week? And it is possible. Jim, you have this fascinating story of one of your students who went to a book a day. Now, don't worry, we're not asking you to read a book a day, but listen to the story so you know what the human mind is capable of.
Yeah, I mean, I always think I was so inspired by this because when I, in that hospital bed, after I learned all that and a light bulb went on, I was like, this is gonna be my life's mission. I don't believe I suffered and struggled for a decade and a half when I didn't have to, when there were easy, fun, little things I could have done to be able to learn this better. And I started to tutor, and one of my very first students, she read 30 books in 30 days. Now, I want that really to land with people. She didn't skim it or scan it or get the gist of it. She read them, comprehended them, and acted on them. So she read 30 books in 30 days, and I wanted to find out, not how, I know exactly how because I taught her, I wanted to know why. And I found out that her mother was dying of terminal cancer. Doctors gave her mother only 60 days, 2 months to live. Wow. And the books she was reading were books that are in this community, books that save her mom's life. Energy medicine, alternative wellness, lifestyle, diet, all of those great things. And I would say, I wish you luck. We said prayers. 6 months later, I get a call from this young lady, and she's crying and crying and crying. It just goes on. And finally, when she stops, I find out they're tears of joy. That her mother not only survived, but it's really getting better. Doctors don't know how, they don't know why. The doctors actually called it a miracle, but her mother attributed 100% to the great advice she got from her daughter, who learned it from all these books. And at that moment, I realized that if knowledge is power, learning is your superpower. That if knowledge is power, reading is your superpower. And people wonder why they have the same presenting problem over and over again. They feel like that their life hasn't made any quantum shifts, that they have the same lifestyle or the same level of growth is because we're living the same thing every single day. We're not feeding our brain new information. And the best way of doing that is through reading.
Right. Now, that reminds me of something else, because when you shared this idea with me, this really shook me, because we don't think about this, but it's true. And the idea is this. I want you to ask yourself this question. When was the last time you learned to read? Jim asked me this question, and I realized the last time I actually studied reading, the last time I learned how to read, I was 6 years old.
Here's the biggest challenge when it comes to reading. You are not born with the ability to read. Right? You weren't born in the hospital and just went to the waiting room and started reading magazines, right? Reading is a skill, and like all skills, how do you improve it? It's not just through practice, it's through training. But when's the last time we took a class called reading? How old were we? We were probably like 6 or 7 years old, right? So here's the question. Has the difficulty and the demand increased since we were 6 years old in terms of what we need to read? Of course. But is it fair to say that's still how we read, because that's the last time we had a training on it? So most of us struggle. We live in an age of electric cars and spaceships that are going to Mars, but our vehicle of choice when it comes to reading is like a horse and carriage. So we haven't upgraded those skills. So that's what this conversation is about. The reason why I know it's not a matter of intelligence, it's a matter of training. And the last time we had a training on this, I'm not talking about a college lit class, was when we were in elementary school. So we are still reading like we're in elementary school.
And it's funny because we are using a tool that we learned when we were 6 to function today in a world of information overload as adults. And I realized that I haven't really upgraded my reading since I was 6, and probably you haven't either.
When you learn how you learn, like in terms of reading, often you could read a book and get more out of that book than even a training with the author, because there's more information in that book.
Yes.
I could teach somebody how to read your book or 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or any of these books, and there's more information in there than you could ever train in a day or 2 days or 3 days in a seminar with you, because it's so dense and full of information. The challenge is, have you ever read a page in a book, got to the end, and just forgot what you just read?
Yes. That happens a lot. Studies show that if you read a book, 24 hours later, 80% of the information you've forgotten.
Right.
In 24 hours.
That's the forgetting curve. Within a day or two, most of it is lost.
Right. Now, the important nuance over here is that, and I really want to stress this is why speed reading never worked for me. I tried picking up some books on speed reading. I learned to skim, right? And I started to fear that reading faster meant less comprehension.
Yeah.
And I wanted to comprehend, I wanted to remember more. What is unique about Jim's approach is that Jim started out as a memory trainer. His first program at Mindvalley, Superbrain, our best-selling program ever, is about learning and memory. Speed reading is the second program.
Yeah.
And so Jim hasn't forgotten the memory part. And so so when I say we're building the #1 program on speed reading, and we found the #1 author, I mean that, because we are stacking memory onto the speed reading system.
Yeah.
For those of you who take the 21-day program, it is possible to double your reading speed, but also massively increase what you remember and what you comprehend.
You know, the other day I get a call, and I was in here in New York, and it was a Friday night. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked it up, and this guy's like, "You got to help me, please." And I was like, "Well, who's this?" He was like, "A mutual friend referred, and he said, my speaker tomorrow, the keynote, canceled for a personal emergency, and we need somebody to fill that spot." And I'm like, "This is not how it works with speakers. You can't call me the night before." And he's like, "Please, you got to save me." And because it was a close mutual friend, I was like, "Well, what's the topic?" And he tells me the topic, and I was like, "I don't know anything about that subject. Why are you calling me?" And he was like, "Well, he wrote a book." I'm like, "So?" "Well, you know, I hear you're a speed reader." And I'm like, "Yeah." He was like, "Well, can you show up a little bit early and read the book?" And I was like, "Oh, this is totally gonna cost you."
Wow.
And I show up that morning at 10 o'clock, I read his book, I present on it at about noon, 12:30, and humbly, it was the highest rated talk of the entire conference. And not because I feel like I'm so great as a public speaker. I've never had a minute of public speaking training, but when you have the ability to read something, retain it, and be able to teach it and apply it, those are the most valuable skills.
So you can pick up a book, read it in 2 hours,
Right.
and then present on it. Okay, so you're going to learn how to increase your reading speed on this masterclass, but
Yeah.
people who go deeper and finish the 21-day
Yeah.
program, will they be able to read a book in 2 hours and then deliver a speech on it?
Yeah, I mean, this is the great thing. Most people could actually read a book in a week. You know how people could read a book in just a week? I went on Amazon and found out the average book has about 64,000 words, the average, or the medium. And so if somebody reads the average of 200 words per minute, if you divide those two, that means it takes about 320 minutes to get through one book.
I see.
That sounds like a lot, but if you divide that by 7 days in a week, that comes out to about 45 minutes, meaning 45 minutes of reading a day will get you through one book in 1 week. Now, if you could triple your reading speed and read it, that means you could do it in 15 minutes a day to get through a book. Yeah, we're averaging with this program about a 300% lift in reading speed and focus.
300% lift.
Yeah,
That's
so
incredible.
imagine this. So it's about 90 minutes to 2 hours to finish a book.
What?
Yeah.
90 minutes to 2 hours to finish a book. Now, the average book, that's based on the average book, which is 65,000 words. And comprehension goes up.
This is the biggest lie when it comes to reading, all right? This is like the biggest lie, is that if I asked you to read faster, your comprehension, you would feel, would go down. But in actuality, it goes up. Because, you know, I've been doing this for over 25 years with students all around the world, and we have a lot of data. We find that the fastest readers have the best comprehension because they have the best focus. Meaning this: you have this incredible super brain. We've proven this, right, with our other program. But you feed this super brain one word at a time. Metaphorically, we're starving our mind, and our brain needs stimulus. And if you don't give your brain the stimulus it needs, it'll seek entertainment elsewhere in the form of distraction, in the form of mind wandering. You wonder why you read something, you start thinking other thoughts, right? It's because you're reading too slow. It's like riding a bicycle. If you ride a bicycle too slow, you wobble and you'll eventually fall. It's like, you know what it is? It's like driving. If you're driving slow or you're in traffic, you're not really focused on the act of driving. What are you doing? You're doing 5 different things. You're thinking about the dry cleaning, you're texting somebody, you're putting on your makeup. I saw someone shaving the other day, right? You're singing a song, you're drinking, you're doing all these things because you're going slow. But let's say you're racing cars and you're taking hairpin turns at the full speed. Do you have more or less focus? You have a lot more focus, right? You're not thinking about the dry cleaning when you're going that fast. You're focused on 2 things, the act of driving and what's in front of you. And the same thing applies to reading. When you're reading faster, you're focused on the act of reading and what's in front of you. You're reading material. And because you have better focus, the better focus gives you better comprehension.
That is incredible.
So that's the big lie and the myth that I think it's a rumor being spread around by slow readers. So I want to put an end to it right now. Faster readers have better comprehension because they have better focus.
In the next part of this masterclass, we're actually going to teach you how to instantly increase your reading speed. Now, you're going to see a bump, and this is going to be so worth your time. But remember, there are 21 screws to fix, to tighten over this 21-day program. So for those of you who enroll in the full program, you're going to see way more than just a bump. So we're primarily going to focus on one of the major screws, which is visual pacers. We're also going to touch a little bit on sub-vocalization. This is one of the things that really slows us down. But let's get started with the first part, which is the visual pacer.
Okay, I'm really excited about this. And now everybody, you're watching this and you want to get some kind of return because your most valuable thing that you have is your time. And so I want to encourage you. I know you have a book to practice with, but you got to open it up because this is where the rubber meets the road. You can't just listen to something. The biggest myth is that knowledge is power. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential power. It only becomes power when we apply it. So now the application begins because learning, just like life, is not a spectator sport. So grab your book, and let's do this. But what I want you to do is I want you to turn to a page in your book that's new for you. If you're just beginning the book, that would be on the first page. But if you left off somewhere, I want you to go to that page, and I want you to take your pencil that you have, or a pen, and I want you to put a little mark in the margin where you left off. All right? And what we're going to do is I want you to read for full comprehension. Read how you would normally read for full understanding and retention, and you're going to do that for 60 seconds. I'm going to call time, and you're going to begin reading. And when you're done, I'm going to ask you to put a mark in the margin where you left off, and we're going to count the number of lines you read in 1 minute.
So I got my book right here,
Yes.
Catcher in the Rye.
All right, so you ready? All right, so we're all going to do this together. You have your book.
I do.
Okay, now, in a moment, I'm going to say go. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, go, and then you're going to begin reading. Read for full comprehension. Read how you would normally read for 60 seconds. Are you ready? Begin. And stop. And now what I'd like you to do now is take out your pen or pencil and put a little mark in the margin. And you're going to count the number of lines you just read. I want to know how many lines did you read in 60 seconds. Do that now. Now, obviously, use your judgment. If there are only 2 words in a line, it doesn't count as a line. So you could guesstimate.
Okay, I did 42.
Fantastic. That's actually really fast. What I want you to do now is write down the number of lines in your notebook. And what we're going to do now is that's the number of lines you read in a minute. We want to know how many words you do in a minute, because reading speed is like typing speed. Typing speed is words per minute, so they measure reading speed the same way. So what I want you to do is count the number of words in the average line. Now, most books will be about 10 words per line, so you're just adding a 0, multiplying by 0. So if you came up with 22 and there are about 10 words per line, then you're reading at 220 words per minute. Now Vishen, you are actually a very strong reader.
I did 378 words.
370.
So that's pretty good.
378 is actually above average.
Fantastic.
The average person reads about 200 to 250 words per minute. So most people, I would find, are in that range. Now it depends. It depends on the difficulty of information you're reading. It depends on your distraction level. It depends on your energy level, right, in terms of when you're reading now, going through this exercise. And so now we're going to teach you a technique on how to actually boost that reading speed. So this new number is what they call your base rate. We call it your base rate because this is what you're starting at. Because how are you going to know if this technique works for you if you don't measure it? Because you can't manage something unless you can measure it. So now we have a starting rate. And now I'm going to give you a technique, one of those screws, to be able to boost it about 25 to 50%. But you're not going to know if it works unless you actually test it, all right? So that's what we're going to do right now. Now the technique, as you mentioned, is using a visual pacer. A visual pacer is a guide that you use, either your finger, a pen, a pencil, a highlighter, maybe a mouse on a computer, because your eyes are attracted to motion. We know this because it's your survival. As a hunter-gatherer, if you're in a bush and you're hunting lunch, like maybe it's a rabbit or a carrot, whatever your diet happens to be, if the bush next to you moves, you have to look at what moves because it's your survival. Number one, it could be lunch, or number two, you could be lunch. So you have to look at what moves in your environment. So when you're underlining the words, your eyes are being pulled through the information as opposed to your attention being pulled apart because your eyes are attracted to motion. Now, it's interesting because traditional speed reading, old school method, is taking your finger and going right down the page. But the problem with that is you miss everything on the left side and everything on the right side. And that's why you get
never worked for me.
Exactly, because you only get the gist of it because you get some key ideas. Or they'll take your finger and what they do is they do these S or Z forms, like these fancy finger motions down the page, but you miss big gaps of information, and that's why it's skimming or scanning, which is sometimes a useful tool because maybe you're just looking for very specific information, but not if you need to retain and understand everything you read. So what I'm saying is underlining the words, not skipping anything, will boost your reading speed 25 to 50%. So using your finger might feel a little bit uncomfortable when you read at first, but really after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe a day or so, it becomes second nature. So number one reason to do it is, first of all, your eyes are attracted to motion. Second of all, kids do it. All children, when they learn how to read, unless they're taught otherwise, will use their finger to help them to focus until we tell them not to. The third reason why is adults do this. And everyone who's watching is like, I didn't use my finger when I just practiced reading. You didn't, but when I asked you to count the number of lines that you just read, everybody did what?
Right.
They did this, 1, 2, 3, their finger or their pen, whatever they're using, because you know intuitively, like in your intuition, you know using your finger helps you to focus. But we don't use that while we're reading, which is kind of interesting, right? And then the fourth reason, besides your eyes are attracted to motion, besides kids do it, besides you naturally do it organically, the fourth reason is it's how your neurology is set up, meaning your nervous system, it's your brain, it's your spine, it's your senses, but certain senses work very closely together. Have you ever tasted a great tasting peach before? Now in actuality, we're not tasting the peach. In actuality, you're smelling the peach. But your sense of smell and your sense of taste are so closely linked that your mind can't perceive the difference. It perceives the difference when you're sick, when your nose is congested. What does food taste like?
It tastes bland.
It tastes bland. It doesn't have the same flavor, right? Because your sense of smell and taste are so closely linked. Just as your sense of smell and taste are linked in your nervous system, so is your sense of sight and your sense of touch. That literally people using their finger while they read, they'll say, I don't know what it is. I feel more in touch with my reading. They'll actually use that language. So I want to encourage, I want to break this myth, this lie that we're told that using your finger while you read slows you down. In actuality, if you want greater speed, use your finger while you read. All right, and so what I'm going to encourage everyone to do, we're going to practice this now. We're going to go back to our book, because this is interactive. You have to do this to get the result. Is I want you to pick up where you left off, and I want you to just begin underlining the words. Now, don't put your finger on the piece of paper or the screen if you're reading on a screen. You don't want to touch it, because there's this thing called friction. And I've started more fires on my books than you can imagine, going as fast as I go. But you want to be right above the page. And really, the practice here is coordinating your eyes to your fingers. You're looking right above your finger and you're just underlining the words. And as you speed up, you start to read faster. All right, so what I want you to do right now is to sit up, and then I want you to pick up where you left off and just begin underlining what you read. Don't worry about comprehension. Just focus on right following your finger and just feel what that feels like. Begin this now. Okay, and stop. And what I want you to do now is just, how did that feel? Now, I know we have people watching this and they're all over the world. You don't have to count the number of lines that you just read right now. We'll do that in a bit. But how did that feel? What did that feel like for you? So how did that feel using a visual pacer?
So it was a different feeling.
Yeah.
But I did feel like I was going significantly faster.
Yeah. For a lot of people, I would expect, some people will say that they had better focus. And so they understood. Even though I told them not to really understand, they still picked up information. But for a lot of people, it feels different. It feels weird.
Right.
You know, in our Super Brain Quest, we gave them exercises to build their brain power and mental fitness, like little things like brushing their teeth with the opposite hand,
right.
Things that challenge themselves to build neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. So this is something where it feels a little bit different. And if that's your case as you're going through this masterclass, that's okay, because that's normal. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna do it a second time. We're gonna practice using your finger. Now, a couple of pointers, quick tips, if you will. Some people, they are reading at a tabletop, and what they'll do is they'll have their book on the tabletop. The challenge is, if you're going and you're reading it at this angle, right, do the words look bigger or smaller at this angle? They look smaller.
Right.
And if they're smaller, are they easier or harder to read? It's much harder to read, especially over time, and that's why you have eye strain. That's why you have mental fatigue. So you want to stack it, ideally, in your favor. Now, in order to make the words bigger and more easily legible, a lot of people, what to do unconsciously is bend down like this, and then they'll see it more flat on, so the words look bigger. The challenge is, remember what I just did, I collapsed my diaphragm, right. And you're not going to get the oxygen. Plus, for those people who have studied physiology, you know that a visual learning style or a visual person is more upright, right? Just like a kinesthetic is more bent, right? And so they're inside their body. And so you want to maintain visual, because reading is a visual activity. And so you want to maintain this. So if you're not going to be able to move your body, what do you want to move? The book. So you want to make sure the book is angled so you can see it properly. And when you're reading it, here's the other thing. When you're going across the page and you're underlining the words, remember the prime directive is following your finger with your eyes. And so what I want you to do right now is to do this with me, is to use your dominant hand, underline the words, and I'm going to time you now for the same 60 seconds. Now what I want you to do, since the last exercise wasn't for comprehension, is to pick up where you left off, the original where you left off. And I'm going to ask you to read for 60 seconds. We're going to put the countdown timer back on, and I'm going to say stop, and I'm going to ask you to count the number of lines you just read. Now read for full comprehension. All right, so use your finger while you read, and you can push yourself a little bit, stretch yourself, because this is an exercise. Part of being your reading coach is a coach, just like a physical trainer, will prompt you and motivate you and cheer you on to do one more lap, one more rep, right? Okay, are you ready? Pick up where you left off in 60 seconds, using your finger, begin. And stop. Wonderful. Put a mark in the margin. And what I want all of you new quick readers to do now is I want you to count the number of lines you just read. Now, the same rules apply. If there's only 1 or 2 words per line, it doesn't count like a line. But maybe you have 2 half a lines and you put them together, count 1 line. Count the number of lines you just read. And when you're done, what I'd like you to do is write down that new base rate. Now here's the question. Was there a difference between the first time and the second time? Now, granted, you've only practiced this all of 2 minutes of using your finger while you read, so you're not a master at this yet. So how was it the second time for you?
So I did about 25% faster.
Yes.
But what was interesting was the comprehension was almost 100%.
That's amazing.
The first time I was kind of pushing myself, but the comprehension I know wasn't as tight as it was right now.
Yeah, and that's common. Now, whether it was completely comfortable, because most people still, again, you've only practiced this for all of 2 minutes. If you practice for another 5 minutes, you'll become like world class at this, and that's really the goal. But this is like our white belt, yellow belt training.
Right.
But you notice a 25% lift, and what I want you to notice at any kind of progress, reward yourself. Right? Give yourself a pat on the back, because that kind of reinforcement is important, because that's the purpose of this, the journey we're taking together. Now, you notice a 25% lift. Most people get about 25, 50%. Now, you started at a very high rate above normal, right? So you can't compound 25, 50% at those higher rates. But we notice with our quest, we're improving about 10, 15% a day. So that's why over the course of a few weeks, people are just amazed, and they tripled, and they didn't realize it's just little things every day. Right. Little by little, a little becomes a lot, right? Because consistency compounds. 10, 15% every single day really adds up. And that's, whether it's your money or it's your time, right, or it's a skill just like this. So I want to congratulate everybody for making that kind of progress. If you didn't get the 25, 50%, a little bit of practice goes a long, long way. And so that's the key to speed and focus. And the reason why you had better comprehension again is you were reading faster, and the speed gave you the focus, and the focus gave you the understanding. And that's really the key. When you go too slow, remember, your mind needs to wander. It needs to imagine other things. It needs to think about all the work stuff, because it's not getting enough stimulus.
That's interesting. That's why I had such incredible comprehension with this one. And you know what I really love about you, Jim, as a teacher, is how much science you put into the way you teach. You see, what's going on over here and how we've designed our Quest program is to take a great teacher like Jim, but also build a great technology that is going to prompt you and guide you on your smartphone or your Apple TV or your Android phone or your desktop 20 minutes a day to upgrade your reading speed. It's 21 days, 20 minutes a day. Now, 20 minutes a day is easily doable for everyone, but consider this. I just did the basic math, right?
Yeah.
And this simple technique boosted my reading speed and my comprehension by about 25%. That itself saves me 20 minutes a day.
Right.
But what I also want to say is that there's a lot of behavioral science and identity shift methodology that's happening over here. What I mean by identity shift methodology is that we're not just working on techniques. This program and Jim, they are working on belief system upgrades By the end of this program, your identity is actually where you see yourself as more intelligent, as smarter, as more capable of consuming knowledge and understanding it and integrating it. You literally start believing and seeing yourself as being smarter than you were before. And that makes a massive difference in how you show up in the world. So one of the things that I'm struggling with is sub-vocalization. And I didn't realize I was sub-vocalizing, but sub-vocalizing is something that you really develop as a 6-year-old.
Right.
And I still have these 6-year-old habits of reading, and you have it as well. Jim, explain sub-vocalization and how it slows us down.
Yeah, we talked about lack of education getting in the way as an obstacle to effective reading. We talked about lack of focus and how greater speed helps you with that. The biggest obstacle actually is sub-vocalization. Have you ever noticed when you're reading something, you hear that inner voice inside your head? Hopefully it's your own voice, it's not like somebody else's voice inside your head. When you're reading, you're like, where does that voice come from? Well, it came from when you are a child, they passed around the book and you had to read out loud. You had to, because the teacher needed to know you were saying it correctly, phonetically. But later on, do you remember when your teacher said, okay class, I want you to read quietly to yourself? Or I want you to read silently to yourself. And that's where you took the external voice and you internalized it. You said to yourself, in order for me to understand it, I need to hear it. If not out loud, then inside my own mind. Now here's the question, because you talk about your brules, right? You talk about these, is it really true or is it BS? And the truth is, do you have to say the words in order to understand them? Like everyone believes they do, but in actuality, the truth is you don't. So sub-vocalization holds us back because here's the premise. If you have to say the words in order to understand them, you can only read as fast as you could speak. If you have to say the words, if you feel like you have to say the words inside your mind to understand what you're reading, your reading speed is limited to your talking speed, but not your thinking speed.
Right. So what's going on with me is that in my mind, I'm reading like a 6-year-old, and I bet you are too. I'm saying the word in my mind, and so I'm limiting my reading speed to my talking speed, to the speed of the voice in my head that is saying each word to me, rather than comprehension speed.
Absolutely, and that's why the average person reads about 200 or 250 words per minute, because that's our average speaking speed. Here's an example. Like leaders of companies, leaders of countries, John F. Kennedy was a very fast reader. He was said to have read 800 to 1,000 words per minute. And I mean, which is astonishing and he's also has a speech recorded at about 300 words per minute. But you know, if he could talk and speak at 300 words per minute, but read at 1,000, there are 700 words per minute he's not pronouncing. Right. He's said to have read 6 newspapers every morning with 1 cup of coffee.
That's amazing.
For most people, it's the opposite. They need 6 cups of coffee just to get the morning newspaper.
So let's do a quick recap, okay? So we need to learn to speed read in today's world because we are facing digital overload. You mentioned that Eric Schmidt said, the former CEO of Google, that every 2 days today we produce as much knowledge across the world as the last 2,000 years. And to survive in today's world, to see our income grow, to truly succeed in today's world, we need to consume knowledge effectively. You also made this very dramatically obvious that we learn to read at the age of 6, and most of us still read like 6-year-olds, including myself. A clear evidence of this is the presence of sub-vocalization, which dramatically slows us down. And you showed us how to use the visual pacer technique to increase speed while increasing comprehension. And we also touched on little things such as sub-vocalization and why we need to clear them, but those are a little bit too complex to clear here. That's in the 21-day program. Now, why this is so important is because when we can read faster, we give ourselves more time, and we also give ourselves more content, more comprehension, more intelligence. We are getting more data into our system, more knowledge that we can then share with the world and raise our level of expertise. But also we free up time in our day, because the average person today is spending 2 to 4 hours a day having to read material, not just newspapers or books, but reports, white papers, internal company memos, and messages on Slack, on email. Now, when you can read faster, you can get to this holy grail of a book a week. And that's tough. I've not been able to do that because it takes me about 7 to 8 hours to read a book. This program can get it down to around 1.5 to 2 hours. All of a sudden, a book a week is possible. And that opens up so many opportunities for the average person. And finally, reading is an incredible exercise for the mind. So that is really powerful stuff. Thank you so much, Jim.
Amazing.
At this point, folks, I want you to know that we come to a fork in the road. You can take the knowledge here, go back, and try to read a little bit faster. And you've also understood, and that itself is a really powerful lesson, you've also understood the importance of reading. You've understood that certain myths about the world hold us back from achieving our potential, such as the myth that when you increase your reading speed, you lose comprehension. You've understood that most of us read like 6-year-olds, and we never really upgrade that. And so you can leave with that and be done, and I hope you enjoyed this masterclass. But there's a certain segment of you, and I hope you're one of them, who want to go deeper and want to go into this 21-day program and really up-level your rate of reading. I can guarantee you that this is one of the biggest investments you can make in yourself. As Bill Gates said, reading is the ultimate superpower. And imagine what your life would be like if you could speed read, if you could consume a book a day. And again, it is not difficult. You've seen how Jim teaches. You know that Jim is the guy who Elon Musk brought to SpaceX to train his kids and Elon and his employees. You know that Jim trains the highest performing individuals in the world. And tens of thousands of people all around the world on the Mindvalley community have seen their lives dramatically change because of Jim's teachings. It's being used in Fortune 100 companies and in governments. And so you truly are learning from a master. I want you to keep this in mind. Data shows that the average person in the world today, the global average, is that you are going to spend $44,000 on your education. $44,000, right? And that's a lot of money. But think about what percentage of that money is going to go to actually learning how to learn. If you're going to spend that much money on your education, $44,000, is it worth it spending a few $100 to upgrade how you're going to learn? Because that is going to make the rest of your education so much more effective, so much more painless, so much easier. And it's going to help you not just ace your exams, but ace at life itself in whatever job you're in. Because no matter where you are in the world today, right, if you're showing up here for this masterclass, you're probably working at a job that requires reading. And so if you scroll down below this video, you'll see that you can read about the program, you can enroll, and we're going to give you a special thank you discount for investing the last hour with us. It's a special unlock price, only available now because you've completed the masterclass. Mindvalley doesn't do online classes because online classes have an astonishingly low completion rate. Mindvalley created a new invention called Mindvalley Quest, and this is a unique form of learning. It is the world's most advanced transformational learning platform, which is why it's blowing up like crazy right now. We just closed our first government clients. We are now closing Silicon Valley companies. But what's going on is on Quest, you start on a particular date with thousands of other students. Everyone starts together. You're on day 1 together, and then day 2, all the way to day 21. We start together, go through the journey together, and cross the finishing line together. Everyone is going to be connected in an online community, and you're going to see that the group is so inspiring because this is what Mindvalley students are. They love supporting each other. You are never alone. You have a question, you pop it in the group, people are going to be there to support you. And we put trained facilitators there to help you along the way. So it's not just passive learning. There's community, there's connection, there's dialogue. Someone is there to hold your hand. And all of this happens on a learning platform based on the concept of micro-learning. That means you don't go through 8 hours nonstop. It's 5 to 20 minutes a day. That's it for 21 days. But we bring in principles of behavioral design and habit design. So every day we change your habits, we change your identities, we upgrade your belief systems. At the end of 21 days, you've basically become a new person when it comes to reading. And you've up-leveled in this remarkable way. And all of it is happening in just a few minutes a day. Can you put in 5 to 20 minutes a day for the next 21 days for a skill that is going to deliver probably millions of dollars to you in the course of your lifetime? I think the answer is yes. And as you can see, because Mindvalley is so big, not only have we created the #1 speed reading program in the world, best teacher, best technology platform, best collaborative student base that's going to be supporting you, but we are also able to bring the prices down to something that is so ridiculously low for a program that's going to contribute so much to your life. Check it out when you scroll down below and see the unlocked price. And of course, for those of you who are new to Mindvalley and are unfamiliar with the quality that goes into these programs, you can try this out practically for the first 10 days completely free. At the end of 10 days, if you want, simply go to mindvalley.com/refund and you can give yourself a refund. So you can pretty much take the first 10 days of this program risk-free. So I strongly encourage you to enroll today because the next batch starts really, really, really soon. And we know if we commit today, we're going to do it. Don't wait on this. Your decision to wait might cost you because life is going to get in the way and you might forget to enroll. Enroll now. And by the way, after you enroll, you'll get an email with all the instructions. You'll learn how to download the app, how to log in, how to access the chapters. You'll learn how to set up your app notifications so it'll remind you every day for your 5 to 20 minutes a day. Everything is there. And we make it super, super, super easy for you. So in a moment, Jim, we're going to address some of the biggest questions that people have about this program. Yeah. Okay, but first, I want to share with you what people are saying about how Jim's work has dramatically transformed their lives. Listen to these stories because these are so inspiring. So check these out, right? Gosh, these are so inspiring. So Rebecca Archuleta said her reading speed increased from 242 to 624. That's 300% since adapting Jim's routine. She's also lost 25 pounds because of the morning routines that you suggest in your programs. Now, some of you might be dyslexic, as Oleksiy Chokov from Belgium is. He said, because I'm dyslexic, it was difficult to focus for a decent period of time on reading without falling asleep. Now I can read for long periods of time with great intensity and comprehension, not to mention my speed increased dramatically. Karen had this dramatic thing to say, right? From starting the reading course last year, she finished her first novel in May, which was the first novel she read in 20 years. By the end of the year, she had read a total of 13 novels and renewed her passion for reading. So imagine, this woman hadn't read a novel in 20 years. All of a sudden, 13 novels in around 8 months. Alvin's in Singapore, right? So Alvin was working at a company, and there was an incident, and the manager assembled everyone together and gave them all a report to read. And then Alvin suddenly found himself being yelled at by the manager. The manager was going, "Why aren't you reading the report? Everyone needs to read this report." And Alvin is like, "Dude, I finished it before everyone else." Yoon, who's in Berkeley, said she's been so busy, she hasn't had time to read books. She could only read articles and reviews of books. With this speed reading program, she's been able to finish a book a week. And if she doesn't read a book a week, she says, she feels incomplete. But it's become that easy for her. So all of these are real users who have used this program. Jim, any closing words?
Okay, so my final words for you is this. I don't share this publicly, but a few years ago, I had an accident and I almost lost my life. And some of you might have had a near-death experience, but it makes you think about legacy. And what was going through my mind at that time was shame on me if I know something that could help somebody and I didn't share that with them.
Jim, so these are some of the most common questions we get about this program. The first one is, why should I learn to read fast when I can listen to books or podcasts or videos at double speed?
Yeah, so the research has shown that, yes, of course, I listen to audiobooks, I listen to podcasts, and most of the time when we're doing this, we're doing something else, right? We're driving, or we're working out, or we're doing it while we're cleaning up the house, or doing some kind of extra work. And so what we found is that what the research shows is the difference between somebody physically reading a book and listening to it, that the person actually reading it has better comprehension and retention of the information and one of the reasons is because they have the complete focus. Where listening to something is very passive, like listening to a television show, right? You're not actively engaged. And we know from the training in Superbrain that learning is not a spectator sport. It requires you to be active because what you put into it is what you get out of it. So when you're reading something, it forces you to engage in the information, to use your imagination. And when you're listening to something, it tends to be more passive, and it also tends to be your total focus is not there, so you have distractions because you're multitasking usually when you're reading. Now, I'm a fan of listening to audiobooks and podcasts again, but I do it for times when I can't actually look and read a book.
Yes.
The other difference also, though, is the mental training. The mental training. Mental training meaning listening to an audiobook activates different parts of your brain than actually actively reading. And so when we talk about where reading is to your mind, what exercises the body, reading is much better for your mental fitness. The other thing is when you learn how to read faster and you're not sub-vocalizing, you could go faster than those audiobooks, even at double speed.
That's true. That's true. So think about it this way. The average book on Amazon, 64,000 words, will take the average person around 8 hours to read.
Yeah.
Now, if you listen to it as an audiobook, firstly, even if you double speed that, that's kind of tough to comprehend with the author talking at twice the speed. I've tried it on my own book. I can understand myself, but that's still 4 hours. When you learn speed reading, comprehension is enhanced, but you're able to do that in 2 hours. So you're still saving hours a day. Now, the second question is, I'm naturally a slow reader and thinker by nature. I'm not very academic. Will this still help me?
The answer is 100% yes. So again, regardless of your age, your background, your current career, your education level, your financial situation, your gender, your personal history, your IQ, this works for everybody because it's a skill. It's like learning how to ride a bicycle. It's like learning how to type. So what we're talking about is skill acquisition and development. So it has nothing to do with your level of education or your IQ. When you learn how to learn, you can learn and apply it towards the things that you want to achieve the most. And reading, if you feel like you're a slow reader or you feel like it's difficult, like most things, it's not your fault. It's because you weren't taught properly. And that's why we designed the Quest, especially for you.
Now, the next question is, I love to read novels, to immerse in the book and enjoy it and to build a world in my head as I read. I don't want to do this quickly. I'm afraid that this will prevent me from truly enjoying a book.
So for those of you who love reading fiction, which is really one of my passions, I love reading fiction. When I was out in my neighborhood the other day, somebody came up to me and said, hey, I went through your course and I recently reread a book that I was reading during your course because we allow people to choose their own reading. So when they go through the Quest, if they have to read something or something's been sitting on their shelf or they have to read something at work, practice in that since you have to read it anyway. So it doesn't take any extra time because you have to do it anyway. And then you can do it now better and faster. He's like, I recently read a book that I was reading during your course, practicing with, but the second time it was totally different. And I was like, what do you mean? What book were you reading? He's like, I was reading The Old Man and the Sea. And I was like, well, I don't think Hemingway updated the book recently. Like, how is it different the second time? He was like, after going through this 21-day program, I felt like I was in the book. He said, I could hear the ocean waves. I could feel the sand beneath my toes. He said, the one thing I didn't like was the smell of the fish. And that's deep comprehension. That's a different part of your brain.
But why is that happening?
Because here's what happens. When you learn how to comprehend something, sometimes it's like after going through this course, what people will say is, I feel like I understand things for the very first time, because we show you techniques to activate the right side of your brain. So your left side is linear, it's words, it's logic, it's sounds, right? And now this is a gross simplification, but the strongest readers tend to be not left brain, but they tend to be more right brain, or at least more whole brain. Because if the left side's logical words and language, which is most people when they're reading, the right side is creativity, it's imagination, it's emotion, it's experience. So the goal is to get more of that in your reading. So this person who is using these techniques, all of a sudden they felt like they were in the book. It's much like movies, because nobody, Spielberg and George Lucas, they can't do what you could do inside your own imagination.
Jim, next question is, tens of thousands of people have taken your first program with Mindvalley, which is called Superbrain. And that's now being translated into like 7 different languages. How is this different from Superbrain?
So Superbrain is very different from the speed reading program. Actually, the speed reading program came and it emerged from Superbrain students. They were asking and actually demanding this program because in Superbrain, we talk about the mechanics of accelerated learning and retaining what you learn. Now, and the best way of learning is through reading. And so Superbrain, if you've gone through it, amazing. If you haven't gone through it, highly recommend it. And the speed reading is like an accelerator for the specific superpower.
But you don't
of reading
have to have
faster.
done Superbrain to do speed reading.
Absolutely not. If you haven't gone through Superbrain and you want to go right into reading because that's a challenge for you, that's something you feel like you can make leaps and bounds growth in, then absolutely this is the program for you.
Amazing. Now, what would be your message to people who have taken Superbrain? Is this like a level 2 program?
If you've already gone through Superbrain, then this speed reading program really is for you. It came out of the demand of hundreds of our Superbrain Quest graduates saying, Jim, what's the next level? I went through Superbrain, I've enhanced my memory, I could read faster, I know the best daily routines to jumpstart my mind, I have the habits, I got the best brain foods. What do I do now? And the next step is learn how to read better. That's really the key. Now that you've activated that other part of your potential, apply that towards your reading to save time, to become an expert in your field, to be able to have greater confidence and performance in the things you need to be able to do, and to accelerate your career, because the faster you can learn, the faster you can earn.
Beautifully said. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you learned a ton in this webinar, and not just techniques to improve your reading speed, but whole new mental ideas of how we're functioning in a world at such a suboptimal level compared to where we could be, and some of the myths that we need to discard about our brain's ability to read and comprehend. For those of you who are enrolling in this 21-day program, I'm so excited to see how you are going to completely transform the way you show up in the world, because when you get to a level where you're able to adapt and read and get to a book a week, everything changes. This accelerates your personal growth. And if you're here, you believe in personal growth. You're constantly evolving. This is going to make that evolution just go so much faster. So I cannot wait to hear your case studies, your success stories, to hear what this does for you. And thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, Jim, for coming on set and creating such a remarkable program with us.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mission.
Thanks, guys.